Here we are for our October the 11th Sunday school lesson. And the lesson series for last week, this week, and the next 2 weeks focus on identifying who we are. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about, to contemplate, to reflect on, because certainly over the last several months, I think a lot of us have been thinking about who we are and where we are and what's our role, what place do we have in everything that's going on, and it certainly has been an interesting time. The lesson is from Joshua, and it's interesting because Joshua is one of those books that is kind of a lesser known book of the Bible, but out of this lesser known book comes a passage that we'll talk about here in a little bit that has become one of the most familiar passages in the Bible and certainly been quoted many times and is something that a lot of people have in their homes. But the book itself, we haven't spent a lot of time in it, at least any Sunday school class I've ever been in. The purpose statement for the lesson is to seek out those people with whom we can commit to mutual accountability to enable our spiritual growth. Now, as I was preparing this lesson, I couldn't help but think about everything that's going on. I mean, we live in troubling times. And I think we can also safely say that in many ways our communities, our country, and in some cases our families are in trouble. And it's a chaotic time. I mean, we see people that are at each other's throats, at odds with each other. I mean, there's words being said. There's, we see in a physical way people attacking each other, and it's disturbing. And one of the things that on social media that I see, and I see a lot of you, and I see a lot of people reflecting on whatever happened to the good times, whatever happened to the good old days, and we reflect back on the good old days. What happened to the time when families sat down together at mealtime and talked to each other about what was going on in their lives, what happened during the day, what was going to happen tomorrow, and just took time to reflect with each other, to share with each other, to laugh together, to cry together. I say that often about our Sunday school class. We haven't been able to get together to do that, and that's so important because we have a very caring group of people, and we want to spend time together. We want to share in our tragedies. We want to share in our good times. We want to be able to laugh together. We haven't been able to do that. But that's because of the situation. That's because of this pandemic. But in a much greater sense, this isolation has been occurring in families. And it just didn't happen overnight. I mean, if you think about it, prayer time in families, time for reflection, has been replaced with PlayStations, with Xboxes, with Facebook, with texting, with all kinds of social media that have replaced families just spending time together and learning about what they were doing. Texting has taken the place of conversation. I mean, people just don't talk to each other anymore, not if they can text. I mean, I've seen people that sit in the same room and text each other in the same room rather than just share with each other verbally. And so I think that's what's happened to the good old days. I've had many people, and they've said that, well, it all started when we took God out of schools. Well, let me just say that that's not quite correct. You can't take God out of anywhere. God is present right here today. God is present right there in your home today. God is present in every building that you walk in. He's present in schools. What has been legislated out of schools is prayer. And I think about when I was growing up, and you can all tell the same story. When we went to school, to elementary school, there was a little bell that came on the speaker system in my case and got everybody's attention. The principal, Mr. Fenwick, would welcome everybody to school that morning, and then he would ask to join him in prayer, and then we would all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. We started every day at school with God and country. I don't remember anybody ever challenging that. I don't remember anybody ever saying, well, that bothers me, that offends me, I don't want to do that. We did it. We did it because that's what we were expected to do. And I guess that, when I look back and I look at relationships, I wonder what happened to that. I wonder what happened that no longer we were saying thank you to God for that time together, for that day that He had given us, and giving thanks to the wonderful country that we live in. So I think that's part of what happened. When we lost the I don't know if it's the right, if that's the right way to put it, but all of a sudden, and it all happened during my lifetime as I was raising children, where we got this sense that we weren't supposed to discipline our children. We were supposed to respect our children. We certainly need to respect, that's not the issue. But that we shouldn't discipline them. That we would needed to just put our arm around them and say, it's going to be okay. Now, as a reminder, Joshua was the heir to Moses. Moses died, Joshua inherited the reins of leading the people. And Joshua, the book, the letter, the recollection was written during the last years of Joshua's life. And so as we always do, we want to look at this passage as I read it, but then we want to go back and reflect on what that says to us today. So we're going to read today and all the way back to the end of Joshua. Our lesson starts in Joshua 24, which is the last chapter in Joshua, and we're going to start reading at 14. So now, revere the Lord, serve Him honestly and faithfully. Put aside the gods that your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if it seems wrong in your opinion to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. Choose the gods whom your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live. But my family and I will serve the Lord. Then the people answered, God forbid that we ever leave the Lord to serve other gods. The Lord is our God. He is the one who brought us and our ancestors up from the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. He has done these mighty signs in our sight. He has protected us the whole way we've gone, and in all the nations through which we've passed. The Lord has driven out all the nations before us, including the Amorites who lived in the land. We too will serve the Lord, because He is our God. Then Joshua said to the people, you can't serve the Lord, because He is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He won't forgive your rebellion and your sins. If you leave the Lord and serve foreign gods, then He will turn around and do you harm and finish you off, in spite of having done you good in the past. Then the people said to Joshua, no, the Lord is the one who we will serve. So Joshua said to the people, you are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen to serve the Lord. They said, we are witnesses. So now put aside the foreign gods that are among you. Focus your hearts on the Lord, the God of Israel. And the people said to Joshua, we will serve the Lord our God and will obey Him. It's an interesting passage. And from that passage we will get, for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And as I said before, it's become a popular phrase. I think that there's a lot of people that have heard that phrase that may not understand where it came from or the context that it was put in. Now let's go back for a second and let's talk about the good old days. Let's talk about the way it used to be. Because that's really what Joshua was telling the people of Israel. When I look back on the good old days, on the olden days, I can't help but think about going to my grandparents, going to my father's parents. They were very involved in their church. They taught Sunday school. They were involved in activities in the church. And I can remember being there on more than one occasion on Sunday morning. And I don't remember one time that my grandparents looked at me and said, would you like to go to church today? Instead, it was, we're going to church, we're leaving at this time. You need to be in the car before we get ready to leave. And the fact that my father was raised that way, that's the way he raised us. I laugh when I go back and I say I'm a keeper of things, and I'll find a certificate for perfect attendance or a certificate for vacation Bible school, which of course was done in the summertime, and I found one that when I was 5 years old I got perfect attendance at vacation Bible school. Well, I didn't have any choice. Certainly when your parents are involved, you don't have a choice. But it was never something that I remember my parents ever saying, do you want to go to church today or not? What do you think? I mean, if you don't want to go, we'll go. Just stay here, but just stay out of trouble. Don't do anything. It was never a choice. We were going to go to church. That was something that we did. It was ingrained in us. We went to church. We went to Sunday school. We went to youth fellowship because that was something we were supposed to do. Now, in this passage that we just read from Joshua, he uses the term serve 14 times because he wants to emphasize the importance of serving God. I remember going back to my grandmother, Dad's mother, and when she passed away, I think I was in the 3rd grade, so I would have been, 9, 10 years old. And I can remember vividly at her funeral. And I can remember the minister talking about that she was a woman who feared God. And I remember thinking about that. I thought, I don't remember her acting scared of God. And we talked about it. We talked about it afterwards. I talked about it with my parents. And we talked about it in the context when we read the term fearing God. We're not talking about being scared of God. We're talking about having deep respect for God. That we have deep respect for the power of God. So we look at this text, and we see that what Joshua was saying here was a call to Israel to make a decision for the Lord. And in verse 14, he uses the term now. He's not talking about later. We talk about the plagues. And I've always found it fascinating, and clearly Joshua was a man who he lived through the time of the plagues. And if you go and talk about the plagues in Egypt, and our worship series with our staff at Mount Zion is talking about Exodus and talking about the people being led out of bondage. And I've always found it interesting in the plague of the frogs, and you'll remember that, and if you don't remember it, it's real easy to look up in Exodus. But in the plague of the frogs, and I think about, here are these frogs that have taken over the land, this plague. And Pharaoh's distressed by it. It talks about the frogs being in their clothes, in their ovens, in their homes. It's taken over the country. And he goes to Moses and he says, Moses, pray to your God to get rid of these frogs, get rid of this plague, get rid of this problem that we have, and I will let your people go. Moses, and sometimes we don't pick up on this part of the passage, Moses looks at him and he said, fine, I will pray to my God, but tell me when. And Pharaoh responds, tomorrow. I've got this terrible problem. I got this burden. I got everything piling on top of me. When do you want me to pray? When do you want me to get rid of that problem? Well, let's wait till tomorrow. What Joshua is saying is now. We need to make that decision now. We don't want to wait till tomorrow. You need to make the decision today. It's one of the most straightforward invitations ever given. It's one of the most clear-cut decisions ever presented to a people. You need to make a decision now. So, as it was straightforward, he challenged them to take immediate action, to get right with God. And my friends, I think about that with me. I think about, yes, I grew up in the church. Yes, I have certainly always had a strong faith and belief in God leading. But I sometimes have to refocus myself. And I think there's two things that have to happen to us. First, for the people to get right with God, they need to understand how to fear God. They need to have that deep respect, that deep understanding of who God is. We must know that not only is God the head of our lives, but God is truly our life. And so he was sharing with them that they had to serve the true and living God. And I think the second thing that he's saying here was that the people must put away all false gods and all false worship and only serve the one true God. That there wasn't any neutral ground, there wasn't any gray area about this. Now we can say, and we've talked about this before, we can say, well, we don't worship idols, we don't have idols, we believe in one true God, but we do. We have other things that we put our faith in. We have other things that we want more than we want our relationship with God. And we've all experienced that, and I'm no exception to that. I mean, he actually charges the people to put these false gods, this false worship away. So now we see Joshua, this old man, and we think about, as we reflect on our lives, of all the things that he must have seen in his lifetime. I mean, in his earlier years, he spent the time serving and spending time with Moses. And in his latter years, he spent time leading God's people into the battle of the Promised Land. And in his years, he's seen the plagues. He's seen the parting of the Red Sea. He took this trip through the desert. He spent 40 years wandering through the wilderness. He saw God part the Jordan River. He saw the punishment of Achan. And as we will remember from a previous lesson, he was the one that was executed for being disobedient. Joshua saw a lot of things. And he knew for his children's sake that a declaration needed to be made. So he's lived a full life. He's been strong. He's been courageous. He's been a warrior for God. He's done as God commanded him. He's got battle scars. He's got battle scars from hundreds of battles. He's known the power and the presence of God. And on his life, he now recognizes that his days are numbered. So he gathers his family together. He summons the leaders together so that he can give them this final address. He said to them in a very clear and direct way that I've been with you for a long time now. We've had good times together. We've had bad times. But now we've come to decision time. Some of you have been serving idols. Some of you have turned yourself away. Some of you have been serving your jobs, your lamb, your sheep, your goats. But now it's decision time. And he said, if you don't want to serve the Lord, if you don't want to make the commitment, the total commitment to God, then you've got to decide today who you will serve. Can you relate to that? I can. I think about in our Methodist faith that John Wesley talked about in his theology. He talks about justification and sanctification. Justification is that grace that God puts in each and every one of us. That grace that God puts in us is freely given. We don't have to earn it. We don't have to work for it. God puts that grace, puts that love in each one of us. But then the concept of sanctification comes into play. Sanctification is that shaping, that molding, that drive for perfection that God puts into each and every one of us. And I think sometimes where we're challenged is, well, we recognize that. Well, we recognize that we have developed our faith, have developed our respect for God over a period of time. We sometimes feel like we've fallen short because it hasn't been a trajectory that's straight uphill. I add another little idea to that theology that's a little bit like a GPS system. You know, I've got a GPS system on my phone. I use it in my car. I use it frequently. You do too. When you plug an address into the GPS system, it says this is how you need to get there. This is the shortest way to get there, the most direct way to get there, the quickest way to get there. But sometimes we say, well, I'd rather go over here first on my way. Sometimes we miss a road, we make a mistake. And what's your GPS system do? It adjusts. Now, I don't know how it works, I don't know how that happens. But your GPS system adjusts and says, okay, I'm still going to get you to where you need to be, but now we're going to go a little bit differently. We're going to navigate a different way. And I think about that in my spiritual life, in my walk, in my journey. because sometimes I do get off track. And yet God is pointing me to where he wants me to be, where I want to be. And he recognizes the fact that I got off track, that I've made a wrong turn, that I did something I shouldn't do. But he refocuses me. And in my GPS system, the term is it recenters you. And it recenters where you're going. And I think that's the way God works in our lives. And that's how this concept of sanctification works in our lives. I'm going to share with you as we finish up a brief story. And I think about our lives, I think about the idea that our Sunday school lesson talks about, to seek out those people with whom we can commit to mutual accountability to enable our spiritual growth. This week I had an experience and I can't get it out of my mind. And I met with somebody that I haven't seen in years. I met this man who's become my friend over 10 years ago. He and I were both involved in development. I've developed a lot of projects. He developed a lot of projects. And when 2007 occurred and everything got up into the financial markets, collapsed, real estate collapsed, and all of a sudden things changed dramatically. And he lost a lot. I lost a lot. And we came together. We didn't know each other at the time, but within a very short period of time, we met through a mutual company that we had both been exposed to. And during that period of time, we spent time together, we shared with each other, and it was a great experience. And I began to realize what a wonderful person he was. Now, I will tell you, we hadn't seen each other in over 7 years. We've communicated every once in a while. He'll send out an email, and I'll respond to it, but we really hadn't met. I mean, he lives all the way down in Charlotte, for Pete's sakes. I mean, 30 minutes away. So we met for lunch, and I kind of laughed when I got ready to walk in, because I thought, okay, I got a mask on, he's going to have a mask on. I haven't seen him in 6-7 years, whatever it's been. Hope I recognize him. I certainly look a little bit different. I don't have as much hair as I had 7 years ago, and it didn't turn out to be a problem. We immediately recognized each other. We were led to a table, we took our masks off, and we began to visit. And what I wanted to share with you, though, has touched me, because we were talking about this very thing. He didn't know what our Sunday school lesson was, but he started talking about Joshua and about accountability. And we talked about what we've been doing with our lives the past 7 years that we hadn't had a chance to visit. And our waitress came up to the table and served our food, and at the end of the meal she came around and she, of course, had her mask on, and she asked me if we needed anything else. We told her that we didn't. And she looked outside and she said, well, go outside in this wonderful weather. She said, it's certainly beautiful out today. I love the fall. And we both agreed. And we said, yep, we do too. And Jack, in his very gentle way, looked at her and he said, you know who's responsible for that, don't you? And she said, yes. And he said, it is a blessing. The fall is a wonderful blessing. And then he went on to say, what's your name? She told him. He said, my wife and I every evening sit down, we give thanks for the day that the Lord has given us. And he said, and we take time to serve up to the Lord the names of the people that are close to us, that we have a special relationship with. We serve up names of people that we've met, that we give thanks for having met them. He said, do you care if tonight when we're together, if my wife and I serve up your name during our prayer time? Now, I got to admit, I was sitting there thinking, where are we going with this? And she said, no, that would be great. And then he went on to say, is there anything in particular that we can pray for you? And it was a response that I hadn't expected. Her eyes filled up with tears. And she said, please pray for my family. She said, I have a teenage daughter, and that daughter is having an awfully difficult time. She's not able to get with her friends. She's not able to go to school. She's on social media. She's being influenced in ways that are very disturbing to us. Please pray for us. And that was the end of the conversation. But what I wanted to share, and why I wanted to share that with you, is I think about all the people in this world that are hurting. If that door had not been opened with that question, we wouldn't have known that. And she's not the only one. People are hurting. They're hurting in ways that we can't even imagine. We're hurting. And yet it's our responsibility as people of faith to share our faith, to share with each other, to open up those doors. And by doing that, and starting with our families, it's a challenging time. Will you pray with me, my friends? We thank you, O God, for all of the ways that you help grow our faith. We thank you for the stories in the Bible of how you formed a people into your community to share your love with the world. We rejoice to serve in that community. Help us to commit to ways that we can deepen our faith, that we can share your message. Open our eyes to those opportunities. Open our ears to those things you want us to hear. And keep our hearts overflowing with that love that you have put in each and every one of us. In his name we pray. Amen. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.